When looking at the used market for SLR from the 60s and the 70s, you may have come across Canons and Nikkons, Olympus and Pentax. There is one brand that's often underrated, and that's Minolta, and that's what I want to talk about today. Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Robin. I'm a filmmaker and photographer based on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. And today I want to talk about this. This is my Minolta SRT-101. I actually learned film photography and photography in general on this camera. And I want to tell you why this body in particular might be one of the best film camera out there to learn film photography. Launched in 1966, the Minolta SRT-101 had one groundbreaking features, and that was TTL, or through lens metering. This allows users to meter at wide aperture. Before that, people need to stop down on their lens to get the actual light meeting reading correctly. Alongside the SRT-101, Minolta released a new set of lenses called MC for meter coupled. This new line of lenses use the same SLR bayonet mount, but they were fully redesigned to take full advantage of the TTL feature. Another groundbreaking feature on this particular body was that Minolta introduced the first matrix metering system. Minolta called that CLC for contrast light compensator. The prism actually has two light cells at different parts of the prism. The two cells took different readings throughout the viewfinders, and that helped compensate for very dark shadows and took a more average light reading of the scene. When it comes to the actual body by itself, it is actually a very simple design and very easy to use. It is made fully of metal, and you have this kind of black wrap around it like you would find on typical SLR at the time. My unit is actually 50 years old since my dad bought this in 1973, and being fully mechanical, it still works like a charm today. My unit also has some improvement compared to the 1966 versions. For instance, here you have this little lever here that allows you to keep the mirror up, and this would be helpful for very wide lenses where the bayonet mount would get in contact against the mirror. On the top here, you have a single knob that does two features. By raising it up, you can set your ISO between, I believe, 16 up to 64,000. And by simply turning the wheel, you can set your shutter between 1 second and 1,000th of a second, plus the bulb mode. There is also a hot shoe for a flash, but it's bare of any electronics because you would actually attach your flash, connect your flash to the camera through these two little things on the side here. It also has a depth of field preview button here on the side, so when you stop down your aperture, you can actually see what's in focus and what's not. Finally, since the SRT-101 does have a light meters, it's powered by a simple batteries. The rest of it is fully mechanical, and you can actually use the camera without the light meters if you choose to do so. And that's one of the advantages of using a fully mechanical SLR. For example, my Nikon F3s, if the battery is dead, I cannot operate the camera anymore. I can only use at 1/60th of a second with the secondary shutter here. And this makes all the other features of the F3 useless. And since the battery on this camera only is used for the light meters, it will actually last forever. I don't even remember the last time I've changed the battery on this camera. Finally, like most Minolta SLR from this time, this SRT-101 is built like a tank. I've used this in various different conditions, from very hot weather to very cold weather by minus 40 degrees Celsius. I also really enjoy the gritty and mechanical sound of the shutter. I don't know if you can hear. But this is not the most quiet shutter, so if you're thinking of using this camera for street photography, for example, people around you will hear the shutter. Another funny feature about this camera is the self-timer. It does come with a self-timer. It is fully mechanical, and I believe it stands for about 10 seconds, and it makes the funniest noise when being used. I'll just show you right now. So you first need to rearm, and then you pull this lever in the front here all the way 45 degrees, and you can see there's a small little button here, and that will actually activate the timer so you have time to run in front of the camera, for instance. So I'll just show you right now. And it continues. And then you release the shutters. It's very, very simple, but always works. Like I said earlier, I learned film photography and even photography in general on that particular film camera. I took it with me to Canada when I moved in 2014, and that's when I really started shooting film. And being fully mechanical, there is not even a aperture priority mode like there is on my Nikon F3s. You really have to set everything yourself. And you start by setting up your ISO, and then your shutter speed, and then your aperture. So you have to understand the actual way the triangle of exposure works. When looking into the viewfinders, there is a needle and a circle. and the goal is to align both to have the correct exposure. So that's why I think this is one of the best film camera out there to learn film photography. It is very affordable. I'll touch base on prices later, but it's also very, very rugged. And despite being 50 years old, this body is in very good shape and it's been used quite a lot. I'm sure he's taken a couple of falls, but you can even see them in the corners. They're like very good. There is a bit of a cuff here, but that's about it. I'm very impressed with the build qualities. Back then, all of those cameras, not only Minoltas, but most of their SLR from the 60s and the 70s, they were really indeed built like tanks. It's just it feels strong. It's not too heavy. Let's talk a little bit about the lenses. When my dad purchased this camera, it came with a 58mm f1.4. Back then, most SLR came with a standard lens, so you could have a 50, a 55, or a 58. And with the SRT101, Minolta chose the 58 focal length, and you had 3 versions depending on how much you wanted to spend. For instance, you had the f1.7, the f1.4, which my dad had, and then you had the 1.2, which is a very good lenses. It is one of the most rare lenses in the Minolta rocker family. When I moved to Canada in 2014 and I took this camera with me, it was mounted with a 28mm f2.8. 28 focal length is great for travel and landscape, for example. And that was the only lens I had at the time. We also had the 50mm lens, but my brother kept this one in France to use alongside an XG2. So I stuck with the 28 for the longest time, and this was great to learn with, but soon enough I found that I also wanted to have the ability to have a standard lens and maybe a telephoto lens as well. So I went on eBay and I was able to get a deal for those 2 next lenses. The first one is a 50mm f1.4, and the second one is a 135mm at f2.8. Those have 2 different generations. This is the MC rocker X, which X was for the North American market, I believe, but this is a 3rd generation of MC. And all of those generations kind of differ because they all have different type of coatings. Whereas this 135mm, this is a rocker PF, also MC, but an older generations. And the way you can see if it's in older generations is most of the time with the focusing ring. Here, the focusing ring is made of metal and it's a different design. The color is actually thicker. Compared to the 2nd and 3rd generation of MC lens, these had a diamond-shaped focusing ring made of rubber compared to the metallic focusing ring on the earlier versions. And I chose those specific focal lengths for the reason being I can basically shoot anything I want. Let's start with the 28. Like I said, you can shoot landscape with it. You can shoot streets. It's great lens for traveling. If you only have to grab one lens, that probably would be the 28mm. Then with the standard lens, you can also do a lot of different things, being standards. Some people like 50mm, some people don't. This particular lens is also one of my favorites. And finally, for a longer subject, far away subject, I have this mid-range telephoto, which is with the 135mm. And this lens is also great for portraits. Being at 2.8, it creates a beautiful render around the subject. Another great thing about the Minolta lenses is the build quality. All of those lenses are part of the rocker family. The rocker family was basically most of Minolta lenses from the 50s, 60s, and the 70s. I believe then in the 80s they changed and started calling them the Minolta. And from there, that's when the build quality and the overall quality kind of started falling down. They stopped using metals like on those lenses and introduced more plastics. So the durability was less good than those. The Minolta lens from the rocker families were also renowned from their lens coating. Minolta spent a lot of money on developing excellent coating for all of the lenses for superior contrast and color rendition. And every single time they came up with a new coating for the lenses, they would actually redo the entire line of lenses. So two lenses from the same generation would match between each other. And here's a fun fact about the early version of the MC rocker lenses. Minolta used a radioactive element, I believe this was thorium, as part of the lens design. And over time, this resulted into a yellow cast in the lens. You may have come across a couple of those lenses on the used market because not only Minolta was using those radioactive elements, and by looking through it, you would see a yellow cast. And this would result into a warmer cast on your film photo, or even when using those lenses on a digital camera with an adapter, and comparing a lens with and without this yellow cast would actually affect your white balance. Fortunately, none of my lenses have this issue, but if one of your old lenses does have it, there is a way to remove that yellow cast. When learning about those radioactive elements in the Minolta lenses, I came across the channel of Justin Phillip. He's a filmmaker that talks a lot about the rocker family and how he used those lenses for filmmaking. So I highly suggest you check out his content. I'll have the link in the description below. And from him, I learned that by blasting a UV light through those lenses for a couple of days, it actually removes the orange cast. And it might come back over time, but that could be a solution if you have a UV light around and you want to bring those old lenses back to their original state. Let's talk about the value of owning a SRT-101 and a couple of MC lenses. First of all, the body. Like I said, I found this body amazing. It is rugged, simple, and perfect to learn film photography. And you can find them on eBay between $50 and up to $250. Most will come with a 50mm lens or a 45, or 55, or 58 at generally around an aperture of f1.7. These are very affordable lenses, but still very good. So don't be afraid to choose a f1.7 thinking it's going to be a bad lenses. There were no bad lenses back then. This 50mm f1.7 is still going to be excellent with this camera. And then when it comes to the other lenses, for example, this 28mm, this is the third generations of MC lenses, and I believe those go for around $50 on eBay. And this is the same for this 50mm f1.4. This is a third generations, and those are like very popular, and there is tons of them. So you can grab one of those in very good conditions, again for around $50. And finally, when it comes to the 135 f2.8, this is a previous generations of a MC lenses. The newer generation, I believe, has an aperture of 3.5. But you can get that lenses for around $20 on eBay. So it is very, very affordable. And it is a great telephoto to use. Now, let's say you got yourself some MC lenses, a nice SRT-101. You shot some film rolls, you enjoy the process, but film being expensive, you are shooting less with it, less than you intended to. And you have all of those lenses now in a drawer, taking some dust and some space. And you feel, oh, well, I shouldn't have bought all of those lenses because this was kind of like a bad investment. Well, you can actually use all of those MC lenses onto a modern mirrorless camera. That's what I'm doing. I bought this adapter from K&F Concept. This is an adapter that allows me to use all of my rocker lenses onto my Canon R6 and R5C. And this is great because if you don't plan to shoot too much film, you can still use the lenses onto a modern camera, and it's being a better investment. All of those lenses have their unique characters, and this will bring you closer to the film look that you may try to replicate with your digital work. I often use legacy lenses for filmmaking. I have a full set of Nikkor lenses, and they work great with my Blackmagic 6K Pro, my R6 and my R5C. And when I look at those rocker lenses, and now that I got that adapter, I'm actually thinking of expanding my set of rocker lenses to be a second set of prime lenses for filmmaking. They would work great on the R5C and R6. However, this SR Minolta lens won't work on EF. You do find some adapters to adapt the MC lenses onto your EF mount, for example, but they'll need some sort of like a glass element in between, and that will reduce the overall quality of your Minolta lenses. There is plenty of way of using those old MC lenses, obviously for your film camera, but if you wish to step down from film photography, you can still use those lenses, like I said, for filmmaking or with your digital camera. That's for me, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you got something from this very quick review of the SRT-101 and overview of the rocker lenses. And if you got something out of it, please consider liking and subscribing so I can do more of those videos in the future. See you next time.